The howling wind rattled the windows of Pinewood Diner as Abby Carson wiped down the counter for the 5th time that hour. Outside, Burlington, Vermont had disappeared under a veil of white, the worst blizzard in decades transforming the quaint town into an Arctic wasteland. Her few remaining customers had left hours ago, but Abby couldn't bring herself to close early. The diner was her life now, all that remained of her dreams after everything that happened in New York. "More coffee, Frank?" she asked the elderly gentleman nursing the last drops in the corner booth. Frank Davidson was a regular who walked 3 blocks every day, blizzard or not, for her homemade cherry pie and a sympathetic ear. "Better not," Frank replied, sliding a 20 across the worn formica. "My doctor would have my hide if my blood pressure spikes again. You should close up, Abby. This storm's getting worse by the minute." Abby smiled but shook her head, tucking the bill into her apron pocket. "I'll stay open a bit longer. Some folks might need shelter tonight. You get home safe now." As if summoned by her words, the door burst open with a gust of snow and frigid air. Abby turned, expecting to see the usual plow driver stopping for coffee, but instead found an elderly woman stumbling through the entrance. She was bundled in a coat far too thin for the weather, her silver hair dusted with snowflakes, her face pale with cold. "Oh my goodness." Abby rushed forward, catching the woman as she swayed dangerously. "Are you all right?" The woman's skin felt like ice beneath Abby's fingers, her breathing shallow and labored as she struggled to speak. I got lost," the woman murmured, her voice trembling with cold. "My taxi dropped me at the wrong address. I can't find my grandson's house in this storm." Her eyes, a striking shade of amber, darted around the empty diner in confusion. Within minutes, Abby had wrapped the woman in the emergency blanket she kept under the counter and placed a steaming mug of chamomile tea between her trembling hands. The color was slowly returning to the stranger's cheeks as she sipped gratefully. "Thank you, dear," the woman said, her accent revealing hints of old-world Italian. "I'm Clara Rosetta." She pronounced it with a slight roll of the R that spoke of decades in America, but origins elsewhere. "Abby Carson," she replied, sliding into the booth across from her unexpected guest. "You picked a rough day to get lost in Burlington. Where were you trying to go? Maybe I can help once the roads clear a bit." Clara fumbled in her purse, producing a slip of paper with shaking fingers. "Lake Manor Estates, the North property. It belongs to my grandson." She hesitated, something flickering in her eyes before she added, "I haven't seen him in nearly 8 years. Abby's eyebrows rose involuntarily. Lake Manor Estates was the most exclusive address in Burlington, a collection of sprawling properties overlooking Lake Champlain where the ultra-wealthy maintained discreet vacation homes. Whoever Clara's grandson was, he certainly wasn't hurting for money. "That's quite a ways from here, especially in this weather," Abby said gently, refilling Clara's tea. "The roads to that part of town will definitely be closed until tomorrow, but you're welcome to stay here as long as you need." Clara's shoulders slumped slightly, her weathered hand smoothing the paper with his address. "I should have called him first, but I wanted to surprise him. It's his birthday tomorrow." A shadow crossed her face. "He's always been so occupied with his business." After Frank left, bundled against the storm, Abby busied herself making fresh coffee and heating homemade soup for Clara. The woman's eyes followed her movements around the diner with surprising sharpness, despite her apparent frailty. "You own this place?" Clara asked, the blanket still wrapped tightly around her shoulders as she surveyed the modest but spotless surroundings. The diner had seen better days, but Abby kept it immaculate, the red vinyl booths gleaming, the chrome fixtures polished to a shine. Abby laughed softly, ladling steaming chicken noodle soup into a ceramic bowl. "Just manage it, though sometimes I pretend it's mine." She set the soup before Clara with a gentle smile. "I always wanted my own restaurant in Manhattan. Life had other plans." "It's charming," Clara said, tasting the soup with obvious appreciation. "Reminds me of a place my late husband and I used to visit in Brooklyn, before he built his business." Something in her tone made Abby look up sharply, catching a flicker of what might have been regret in Clara's amber eyes. As the afternoon wore on, the storm intensified. Abby called the owner to explain she was staying open as emergency shelter, then made up a makeshift bed for Clara in the back office. The older woman had grown tired, the journey and cold taking their toll. "I should call my grandson," Clara murmured as Abby helped her to the small couch, her voice suddenly anxious. "He checks the security system constantly. If he sees I've arrived in Burlington but not reached the estate, he'll worry in his way." Abby raised an eyebrow at that peculiar phrasing, but handed Clara the diner's phone. "Call him. Let him know you're safe. She watched as Clara dialed, her expression growing increasingly anxious as the rings went unanswered. Voicemail again. Clara sighed, leaving a brief message explaining where she was before handing the phone back. He's probably in a meeting. My grandson practically lives at the office when he's not handling other matters. What does he do? Abby asked casually, helping Clara settle on the couch with an extra blanket. The question seemed innocent enough, but something about the way Clara tensed made Abby's investigative instincts flare to life. He manages our family interests, Clara replied carefully. Import businesses, mostly. From Italy originally. She paused, studying Abby's face. And what's your story, dear? A smart, kind young woman like you should be running your own place by now. Abby's smile faltered slightly as she smoothed her apron, memories of Manhattan high-rises and federal courtrooms flashing unbidden through her mind. Life took some unexpected turns, but that's ancient history. She straightened, forcing brightness into her voice. Rest now. I'll be right outside if you need anything. As Clara drifted off to sleep, Abby returned to the empty diner. The snow continued to fall in thick, hypnotic sheets, piling against the windows like silent sentinels. She should be frightened by the intensity of the storm, worried about power outages or frozen pipes, but instead she felt an odd sense of peace. For the first time in 3 years, she had nowhere else to be, no one watching from the shadows, no need to check over her shoulder with every closing door, just an empty diner, a sleeping old woman, and the quiet hush of snow blanketing the world. Abby was wiping down tables when headlights cut through the swirling snow outside. A massive black Escalade pulled up to the curb, its tires crunching through the accumulated drifts. She froze, dish towel clutched in suddenly trembling fingers, as she watched the imposing vehicle idle at the curb. A tall figure emerged, battling against the wind as he made his way to the diner's entrance. When the door opened, Abby found herself face to face with the last person she expected, and feared to see that night. Dante Rosetta stood in her doorway, snowflakes melting in his raven black hair, his expensive cashmere coat dusted with white. His face, known only to Abby from newspaper photographs and court sketches, was even more striking in person. All sharp angles and intensity, amber eyes identical to Clara's scanning the empty diner until they locked on her. "I'm looking for Clara Rosetta," he said without preamble, his deep voice carrying the barest hint of his grandmother's accent. She left a message saying she was here. The words were spoken calmly, but Abby recognized the underlying steel of command from men who expected immediate obedience. Abby straightened, meeting Dante Rosetta's intense gaze with practiced composure. 3 years managing a diner after what she'd been through had taught her to handle difficult customers, and she suspected the man standing before her defined the word difficult in ways few could imagine. "Mr. Rosetta," she said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Your grandmother is resting in my office." She was half frozen when she arrived. Something flickered in his eyes, concern perhaps, but it disappeared so quickly Abby wondered if she'd imagined it. "Take me to her," Dante demanded. Not a request, a command from a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted, when he wanted it. The notorious head of the Rosetta family import business that the FBI had tried and failed to link to organized crime for over a decade. Abby crossed her arms, thankful that her trembling had subsided. She's sleeping. The cold and stress exhausted her, and at her age, rest is crucial. She held his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite knowing exactly who he was, what he was. "I didn't drive through a blizzard to be told I can't see my own grandmother," he replied, his voice remaining level, but ice creeping into his tone. His broad shoulders tensed beneath the expensive coat, his stance shifting almost imperceptibly. "And I didn't risk staying open in this storm to have someone barge in and disturb an elderly woman who needs rest." Abby matched his tone exactly, tilting her chin slightly. "She's safe. She's warm. She'll be thrilled to see you when she wakes." For a moment, they stood locked in silent confrontation. Abby could practically see the wheels turning behind those piercing amber eyes, likely calculating the fastest way to get what he wanted, or the cost of removing her as an obstacle. To her surprise, he exhaled slowly and nodded once, the gesture regal despite its simplicity. "Fine. May I at least look in on her?" The slight softening in his voice caught Abby off guard, a glimpse of something unexpected beneath the dangerous facade. Of course. Abby led him through the diner to the small office in back. "Quietly, please." Dante followed, his footsteps soundless despite his size. She opened the door just enough for him to see Clara sleeping peacefully on the office couch, wrapped in blankets, color returned to her cheeks. His expression softened as he watched his grandmother sleep, the hard lines of his face momentarily gentling into something that might have been tenderness. Abby observed the transformation with surprise, having difficulty reconciling this glimpse of humanity with what she knew of Dante Rosetta. "She was trying to surprise you," Abby whispered, closing the door gently. "For your birthday. Got lost in the storm with only your address in her purse." The way his jaw tightened told her this information was unexpected. Back in the diner's main room, Abby gestured to a booth. "Coffee? You look like you could use some warmth, too." He seemed about to refuse, then glanced out at the worsening storm and nodded once, the gesture almost reluctant. As Abby poured 2 cups, sliding one across the table as she sat opposite him, Dante removed his cashmere coat, revealing an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. She fought the urge to fidget under his intense scrutiny, those amber eyes missing nothing. "How did my grandmother find you?" he asked after taking a sip of coffee, his eyebrows rising slightly in apparent surprise at the quality. For a moment, Abby considered lying, but something told her this man would know instantly. She stumbled in half-frozen, said her taxi dropped her at the wrong address. Abby wrapped her hands around her mug, seeking comfort in its warmth. "She mentioned wanting to see you on your birthday, to make amends for something." Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at that last word. "My grandmother excels at dramatic gestures, especially when she wants something." His tone had cooled considerably, amber eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Braving a blizzard at her age goes beyond dramatic," Abby observed, surprised by her own boldness. "Seems more like determination, or perhaps desperation." The way his eyes snapped to hers confirmed she'd struck a nerve. "You don't know anything about our situation," he said sharply, voice low but dangerous. His hand tightened around the coffee mug, knuckles whitening momentarily before he visibly forced himself to relax. Abby shrugged, refusing to be intimidated despite the warning signals flaring in her mind. "True, but I know she could have died out there trying to find you. That says something significant about what you mean to her." Dante studied her with new interest, head tilting slightly as he reassessed her. Most people cowered around him, intimidated by his reputation, or the power he exuded like a physical force. This diner manager spoke to him as an equal. "Do you know who I am?" he asked suddenly, the question carrying layers of meaning beyond the simple words. His amber eyes bore into hers, searching for signs of fear or recognition. Abby couldn't help the small, bitter smile that curved her lips as memories of a Manhattan courthouse and whispered threats flooded back. "Is that the question you ask everyone you meet?" For a moment, surprise flickered across his features. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Only the ones who aren't properly terrified of me." The admission carried an edge of dark humor, as if they were sharing a private joke, rather than acknowledging his notorious reputation. The moment was interrupted by Clara's appearance at the office doorway, her silver hair rumpled from sleep, but her amber eyes, so like her grandson's, bright and alert. "Dante," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "You came." Dante was on his feet in an instant, crossing to his grandmother with fluid grace that belied his size. "Of course I came. You left me a voicemail saying you were stranded in a blizzard." His tone was measured, but Abby could hear the concern beneath it. "I wanted to surprise you for your birthday." Clara reached for his hand, her expression hopeful yet cautious. To Abby's surprise, Dante allowed the contact, though tension radiated through his powerful frame. "My birthday isn't for 2 days," he said, without the coldness Abby had expected. "And you should have called first. Burlington is too dangerous right now, especially for you." The layers beneath that statement made Abby's instincts flare to life again. Clara squeezed his fingers, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know, Caro, but I thought we might need time to talk before celebrating." Something passed between them, an unspoken current of shared history that excluded Abby completely. "The roads are closed," Dante said instead of addressing his grandmother's comment. "We'll have to stay here tonight. Miss Carson has been accommodating." His gaze flickered to Abby, reassessing her yet again. Clara's face brightened immediately. "Abby is a remarkable young woman, isn't she? So capable under pressure." She patted her grandson's arm with her free hand. "Reminds me of myself at that age, before I met your grandfather." Before either could respond, headlights swept across the windows as another vehicle pulled up beside Dante's Escalade. Abby moved to the window, peering through frost-rimmed glass at a sleek black sedan now idling at the curb. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice as she turned to Dante. His expression had hardened again, all trace of warmth vanishing as he moved protectively in front of his grandmother. "My security detail," he replied tersely, hand slipping briefly inside his suit jacket, an emotion Abby recognized all too well. They should have stayed at the perimeter as instructed. His tone suggested someone would pay dearly for that disobedience. The door opened, and a lean man with cold eyes entered, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. "Boss, we have a situation." His gaze swept the diner before landing on Abby with narrow-eyed recognition that made her blood run cold. "Well, this is unexpected. You know each other?" Dante's question sliced through the sudden tension, his amber eyes darting between Abby and the newcomer. She had gone perfectly still, her face draining of color as memories surged back in a sickening wave. "Leo Santini," she whispered, the name falling from numb lips. Former FBI special agent assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force. Her eyes never left the man's face as she added, "The agent who promised to keep me safe after I testified." Leo's expression shifted to calculated neutrality as he addressed Dante directly. "Miss Carson here used to be Abigail Reynolds, key witness in the federal case against the Bianchi family 3 years ago." His cold smile never reached his eyes. "Disappeared from witness protection 2 years back." Clara gasped softly, her hand flying to her lips as she looked between Abby and her grandson. "Dante, she didn't know who we were. She was just being kind." The plea in her voice was unmistakable, but Dante's expression remained unreadable. "Everyone sit down," Dante commanded, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. He gestured Leo toward the counter while keeping himself positioned between both men and the women. "Now explain, Miss Reynolds, or Carson, exactly who you are." Abby's hands trembled slightly as she slid back into the booth, mind racing for a way out of this nightmare scenario. "I witnessed Angelo Bianchi execute 2 of his associates in a Manhattan restaurant where I was working," she began, voice steadying as she spoke. "The FBI promised me a new identity and complete protection in exchange for my testimony. What they didn't mention was that half their organized crime division was on Bianchi's payroll." She glanced pointedly at Leo, whose expression remained carefully blank. Leo leaned against the counter, arms crossed defensively. "Those allegations were never proven." The witness became paranoid, uncooperative with handlers. Classic case of someone who couldn't adjust to program restrictions. "Uncooperative?" Abby's laugh held no humor. "I cooperated right until the night I found 2 of Bianchi's men waiting in my safe house, a location only my FBI handlers knew." The memory sent ice through her veins even now, years later. Dante's amber eyes had never left her face, cataloging every micro-expression as she spoke. "And how did you escape this unfortunate situation?" The careful neutrality in his voice couldn't quite mask his interest. "My handler that night was actually honest. Officer Patricia Wright," Abby replied, surprising herself with how clearly she remembered the woman's face. "She got me out through the service entrance, gave me cash from her own wallet, and told me to run as far as I could." Clara reached across the table, covering Abby's cold hand with her warm one. "You've been hiding alone all this time, dear." The genuine compassion in her voice nearly undid Abby's carefully maintained composure. 3 cities in 2 years before I landed here," she confirmed, finally looking directly at Dante. "I chose Burlington because it's the last place anyone from New York's crime families would look." The irony of her current situation wasn't lost on her. Leo's phone buzzed, drawing his attention momentarily. "Boss, we've got incoming." Surveillance picked up 3 vehicles turning onto Main Street, Bianchi configurations. His hand moved toward his shoulder holster with practiced efficiency. Dante rose smoothly, no trace of alarm in his controlled movements. "How many?" His question was directed at Leo, but his eyes remained fixed on Abby, calculating, assessing potential threats, including her. "At least 6 men, possibly 8, heavily armed." Leo moved toward the window, peering carefully through frosted glass. "They're moving deliberately, checking buildings. Someone tipped them off that something valuable is here." Clara's hand tightened around Abby's, her amber eyes suddenly sharp despite her frail appearance. "It's not coincidence, Dante. Remember what I brought to show you?" She reached into her pocket with her free hand, withdrawing a small USB drive. "Grandma, not now," Dante warned, his attention divided between the approaching threat and the unexpected revelations about Abby. He gestured to Leo, giving silent commands that sent the man moving efficiently toward the back of the diner. "Yes, now," Clara insisted with surprising force. "This contains the evidence linking the Bianchi organization to the murdered federal prosecutor, The one they framed your father for 20 years ago. She pressed the drive into Abby's palm, closing her fingers around it. The pieces suddenly clicked into place with sickening clarity. You knew who I was, Abby whispered to Clara, realization dawning. You didn't get lost in the storm. You found me deliberately. The old woman's guilty expression confirmed her suspicion. Clara nodded once, squeezing Abby's hand around the drive. I needed someone the FBI and the Bianchis both believed was gone. Someone with nothing left to lose who might still want justice. Her amber eyes held Abby's, pleading for understanding. Dante's expression darkened as he looked between his grandmother and Abby, understanding dawning in his amber eyes. You used her as bait, Grandma. You knew the Bianchis would eventually track her down through their FBI contacts. Clara lifted her chin defiantly despite her frail appearance. I used the resources available to me, the same way your father taught you. She turned to Abby, squeezing her hand apologetically. I needed someone they would come for. And what happens to me now? Abby asked, voice steadier than she felt as she closed her fingers around the USB drive. I'm caught between two crime families and corrupt FBI agents with nowhere left to run. Dante moved to the window, peering through the curtain of snow at the approaching headlights. Leo, take my grandmother to the back office. Secure the exit route. His command was followed without question, Leo guiding Clara despite her protests. You should go with them, Dante told Abby, not looking at her as he reached inside his jacket, removing a sleek handgun with practiced ease. You're the one they want. If you leave with my grandmother, you both have a chance. Abby stood her ground, years of running suddenly crystallizing into determination. If I leave, they'll burn this place to the ground looking for me. This diner is all I have left. The admission cost her, but she refused to flee again. Dante turned, really looking at her now, something like respect flickering in his amber eyes. I can't guarantee your safety if you stay. His voice had softened fractionally, a genuine warning rather than a threat. I testified against Angelo Bianchi after watching him murder 2 men in cold blood, Abby replied, reaching beneath the counter to retrieve the Louisville Slugger she kept for protection. I haven't felt safe in 3 years. A wry smile curved Dante's lips as he watched her grip the baseball bat with determined hands, a witness against the Bianchis who refuses Rosetta protection. You're either very brave or completely insane, Abigail Carson. Probably both, she admitted, her own smile grim as she moved beside him at the window. But I'm tired of running, and your grandmother went to extraordinary lengths to bring us together for a reason. The first vehicle slowed near the diner, its headlights illuminating the swirling snow like searchlights. They'll try the diplomatic approach first, Dante explained, positioning himself so he remained hidden from outside view. They always do, especially on neutral territory. Leo reappeared silently, placing a sleek metal case on the counter and flipping it open to reveal an array of weapons. Backup team is in position around the perimeter. Clara's secure in the panic room beneath the storage cellar. His movements were precise, military-trained. Abby stared at the arsenal, the reality of her situation crashing down like an avalanche. This isn't just about me anymore, is it? She turned to Dante, whose face had transformed into an expressionless mask. This is about family honor, territory, and power. It's about justice, Dante corrected, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. The Bianchis destroyed my father with false evidence while corrupting the very system meant to protect people like you. His amber eyes held unexpected conviction beneath their coldness. Snow pelted against the windows with renewed fury, nature's percussion building to the approaching confrontation. Abby remembered the first time she'd testified, trembling, terrified, but determined to do what was right, despite the consequences that would follow. Your father was innocent all along, she realized, pieces clicking into place. Clara kept investigating while he served his sentence, gathering evidence until she found the missing link. She looked at the USB drive in her hand with new understanding. The diner's ancient heating system groaned as if protesting the coming violence, warm air battling against the winter's chill. If we survive this, Abby said quietly, I want witness protection done right this time, for both of us. The implication that their fates were now intertwined hung between them. Abby's heart pounded as she saw men emerging from the vehicles, dark figures moving with purpose through the blizzard. What do they want with me after all this time? My testimony wasn't enough to convict Angelo. It's not about your testimony anymore, Dante said grimly. It's about what's on that drive. My father discovered evidence linking the Bianchis to federal prosecutor William Harding's murder 20 years ago, the crime they framed him for. Realization dawned cold and clear in Abby's mind. That's why your grandmother sought me out. She needed someone who could get this evidence to the authorities without being dismissed as just another criminal trying to take down rivals. Dante nodded once, his expression hardening as the first man reached the diner door. Someone with credibility. A known witness who disappeared rather than taking bribes. His amber eyes held hers for a moment. Someone honest. The bell above the door jingled as a well-dressed man in his 50s entered, brushing snow from his shoulders with casual elegance. His smile was charming, his manner refined. Nothing about him suggested violence except the cold emptiness behind his eyes. "Miss Reynolds," he greeted Abby as if they were old friends. "What a pleasant surprise to find you alive after all this time." His gaze slid to Dante, the smile never wavering. "And in such interesting company." "Carlo," Dante acknowledged with a slight nod, his posture relaxed but alert. "This is neutral ground. I trust you remember the old agreements between our families." His tone remained conversational, but Abby heard the subtle warning beneath. Carlo spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "Merely a social call. When we heard rumors of Miss Reynolds' whereabouts, naturally we were concerned for her well-being." His smile turned cold as winter. Witnesses who vanish often meet unfortunate ends. Abby stepped forward, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. "I've been hiding from your organization for 3 years, Mr. Bianchi. I think we both know this isn't a social call." The baseball bat remained visible in her grip, a clear statement. Carlo's facade slipped momentarily, revealing the predator beneath the polished exterior. "You have something that belongs to my family, a small digital item that an elderly woman might have recently given you." His eyes flicked meaningfully to her closed fist. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Abby lied smoothly, years of fear crystallizing into cold resolve. "I'm just a diner manager caught in a snowstorm with unexpected guests." The USB drive felt heavy in her palm, its contents suddenly burning with significance. Carlos sighed as if genuinely disappointed. "That's unfortunate. I'd hoped to resolve this quietly." He gestured toward the window, where his men stood waiting in the swirling snow. "My associates are less diplomatic than I am." "So are mine," Dante countered, nodding toward the kitchen where Leo and 2 other Rosetta men had appeared, weapons visible. "But I'm curious, Carlo. Why send a capo for a simple retrieval? Unless what's on that drive truly terrifies Angelo." Carlo's expression hardened, the pretense of civility evaporating like snow on a hot engine. "That drive contains fabricated evidence created by a desperate man trying to clear his name before he died in prison." His gaze shifted to Abby. "Give it to me, and you walk away. Keep it, and you won't leave this diner alive." I walked away from witness protection because the FBI was compromised," Abby replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've spent 3 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for men like you to find me. I'm done running." Dante moved subtly closer to Abby, his presence reassuring despite everything she knew about him. "You have 2 options, Carlo. Leave now and maintain the truce, or escalate this into something neither of our organizations can afford." The tension stretched between them, Carlo's cold calculation visible as he weighed his options. "You're protecting a witness against your business rivals, Dante. The commission won't look favorably on that, especially given your family's precarious standing." "I'm protecting an innocent woman who sheltered my grandmother during a blizzard," Dante corrected smoothly. "Family honor demands nothing less." The steel beneath his words left no room for misinterpretation. Carlo's hand moved toward his coat, but froze as Dante's weapon appeared, aimed with unwavering precision. "That would be unwise," Dante advised quietly, "especially since the evidence doesn't just implicate your family in Harding's murder." Understanding dawned in Carlo's eyes, followed quickly by carefully controlled fury. "What are you suggesting?" His voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper, all pretense abandoned as he stared at Dante. Abby stepped closer to Dante, her presence signaling an allegiance that made Carlo's eyes narrow dangerously. "The evidence shows a conspiracy that goes beyond family rivalries," she added, drawing strength from somewhere deep within. "It names 12 federal agents who falsified reports and destroyed evidence." The diner's ancient clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, each second pulsing with lethal possibility. Outside, Carlo's men shifted positions, their shadows dancing across snow-frosted windows, like menacing puppets awaiting command. "My father died believing his name would never be cleared," Dante continued, each word precise as a surgeon's cut. "His last request was that my grandmother deliver this evidence to someone who couldn't be bought, blackmailed, or intimidated." his gaze fixed meaningfully on Abby. Carlo laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "And you believe this? This diner manager has the connections to make that happen?" His dismissive gesture toward Abby revealed the fatal flaw in his assessment, underestimating her significance. "I believe," Dante replied, his tone deceptively conversational, "that Miss Carson's former position as assistant to federal judge Eleanor Hammond gives her precisely the connection needed." The revelation landed like a physical blow, Carlo's composure slipping further. Abby kept her expression neutral, despite her shock at Dante's knowledge of her past life, details she'd never shared with anyone in Burlington. The chess pieces were moving now, each player revealing strategies long held in reserve for this exact moment. Dante's smile was cold as the blizzard outside. "The same evidence that exonerates my father also reveals which FBI agents helped cover up the murder, including the current director of the Organized Crime Division, your cousin by marriage, if I'm not mistaken." Carlo departed 20 minutes later, his elegant facade cracked by barely controlled rage. The fragile peace between families would hold, for now, but Abby had no illusions about her safety. Once word reached Angelo Bianchi about the evidence, nowhere would be safe. "You need to leave Burlington immediately," Dante told her as he watched Carlo's vehicles disappear into the snowstorm. "They'll be back with more men once they regroup." His expression was grim as he turned to face her. "And go where?" Abby asked, the exhaustion of 3 years on the run suddenly crushing down on her shoulders. "There's nowhere they won't find me eventually." She looked around at the small diner that had become her sanctuary, her only home. Clara emerged from the back office, Leo hovering protectively at her side. "You'll come with us, of course." Her tone brooked no argument as she approached Abby. "To the Lake Manor property. It's the most secure location in Vermont." Dante's expression suggested this wasn't the plan he had in mind, but he didn't contradict his grandmother. "The evidence needs to reach the right authorities," he said instead. "Someone with enough power and integrity to act on it without being compromised." "I have a contact," Leo offered unexpectedly. "A federal judge who's been building a case against corruption in the Bureau for years. She's the reason I left the FBI." His expression turned haunted. "I discovered things no patriot could ignore." Clara took Abby's hands in hers, the USB drive still clutched between them. "I'm sorry I used you, dear. But Anthony, my son, deserves justice, even posthumously." Tears shimmered in her amber eyes. 20 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, dying alone while his name remained tarnished. "We can clear his name," Abby found herself saying, the weight of the evidence in her hand suddenly feeling like purpose rather than burden, "and bring down the people who betrayed my trust in the system." 3 days later, as dawn broke over Lake Champlain, Abby stood on the private dock of the Rosetta estate, watching federal agents escort Carlo Bianchi and 3 high-ranking FBI officials into custody. Judge Eleanor Hammond had moved with stunning efficiency once presented with the evidence. "It won't end with these arrests," Dante said quietly, joining her at the water's edge. "Angelo Bianchi will retaliate. The corrupt agents had friends. This is just the beginning of a very dangerous time." His amber eyes studied her profile in the rosy light of dawn. Morning mist rose from the lake's surface, creating ghostly tendrils that curled around the dock posts. "Judge Hammond offered me a position on her special task force," Abby revealed quietly, "helping identify other witnesses who disappeared when their handlers were compromised." Dante's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "That would keep you in the spotlight, exactly where the remaining corrupt agents will be looking." His concern seemed genuine beneath the practical assessment. "It also gives me federal protection that doesn't rely on secrecy alone," she countered, turning to face him fully, "and purpose beyond merely surviving." The sunrise painted her features with golden determination, transforming the frightened witness into something formidable. A pair of loons called across the water, their mournful cries echoing between the forested shores. "Clara wants you to know that your apartment above the diner has been completely renovated," Dante said, changing tactics. "Security systems, bulletproof glass, emergency exits, all the comforts of witness protection without the isolation." Abby couldn't suppress her smile at the obvious manipulation. "Your grandmother is a force of nature. Yesterday she asked when I planned to give her great-grandchildren." The memory of Clara's blunt question brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. Small waves lapped gently against the dock's wooden pilings, the rhythm steady and reassuring. "Did you know," Dante said, looking out across the water, "that my father used to bring me fishing here when I was a boy?" Before the accusations, before everything changed, his voice held a vulnerability she'd never heard before, a glimpse of the man he might have become in a different life. The silence that followed felt charged with possibilities neither was quite ready to name. Lake Champlain stretched before them, its waters reflecting a sky transformed from darkness to brilliant morning gold, a visual metaphor for what had changed between them since that snowy night. Abby nodded, wrapping her coat tighter against the chill. I know, but for the first time in 3 years, I'm not running. I'm fighting back. The determination in her voice matched the steel that had always been there, hidden beneath layers of fear and survival. Dante hesitated, then offered her an envelope. My lawyers have arranged for you to receive a significant reward for your role in clearing my father's name. His expression remained carefully neutral. Enough to start over anywhere you choose, with a new identity no one can trace. Abby accepted the envelope, but didn't open it. And if I don't want to start over somewhere else? The question hung between them, laden with meanings neither was quite ready to articulate. What if I want to rebuild right here? The diner? Dante asked, something like surprise flickering across his features. It's hardly secure, even with Rosetta protection. His practical assessment couldn't quite mask the other question in his eyes, the one he wasn't asking. Not just the diner, Abby clarified, taking a risk greater than any testimony. A life, here in Burlington. She met his gaze directly, refusing to look away as snow began to fall gently around them, delicate flakes catching in her hair. Understanding dawned in Dante's amber eyes, followed by something she'd glimpsed only briefly before. Warmth, genuine and unguarded. That could be complicated. His voice had softened, the hardened crime boss momentarily giving way to the man beneath. Life is complicated, Abby countered, a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. I testified against a mafia family, went into witness protection, escaped corrupt handlers, and hid for 3 years only to be found during a blizzard by the grandmother of another crime family's leader. Complicated seems to be my specialty. Dante laughed then, the sound startling in its genuine delight. When you put it that way. He stepped closer, his hand finding hers with unexpected gentleness. Clara was right about you. You remind me of her in her younger days. Unstoppable when you've made up your mind. 6 months later, the former Pinewood Diner reopened as Rosetta's, a stylish cafe that quickly became Burlington's most popular gathering spot. Rumors about its ownership circulated persistently, the beautiful former witness who ran it, the notorious businessman who visited daily, and the elegant elderly Italian woman who held court at the corner table. You've transformed this place, Dante observed, watching Abby move confidently among the tables. The cafe buzzed with life, warm light glowing against the deepening twilight outside. The winter's snow had long since melted, giving way to Vermont's lush summer greenery. Abby smiled as she slid into the booth across from him, her hand finding his with practiced ease. We transformed it, she corrected. You, me, Clara, even Leo with his suspicious glowering from the corner booth. She nodded toward the former agent who now headed Dante's security detail. Clara joined them, settling beside her grandson with a contented sigh. Have you told her yet? She prompted, patting Dante's arm with grandmotherly impatience. Her amber eyes sparkled with mischief as she looked between them. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is what keeps me creating stories like this one.